Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. Coffee Conversations with Greg J is on. My fancy little video is missing out of the mechanisms here, but it's all good. Shoot, we don't need no, you know what it is. Coffee Conversations, no frills. We going in hard, and I guess that's really relevant to today's discussion, right? So, Juneteenth, it's coming up Saturday. Father's Day weekend, too. Don't forget us dads. We get forgotten, but it's all good. That's a whole nother conversation that I'd like to have, except the comment. I saw where Oprah Winfrey had a special, right, about fathers honoring our kings, I guess she called it. She had a lot of people on there, John Legend, D.L. Hughley, a lot of great guys who are fathers. And it just seemed misplaced that Oprah, of all people, would be celebrating dads. I just never known her to be that, that one, that celebrates patriarchy. And I'm not saying patriarchy is a bad thing. I'm just saying, But enough about that. Juneteenth coming up on Saturday. Juneteenth is a holiday, a commemoration of the commemorating the event. I'm trying to frame my words. Commemorating the event of where the slaves in Texas, the enslaved, finally got word that they had been freed 2 years earlier by the Emancipation Proclamation. Up until this time, it's been a holiday that, mostly the people down there in Texas and Louisiana is a big deal. Oklahoma. Slowly but surely has, began to increase in popularity across these United States. Ever since George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, now it's on 10. It's across everybody's consciousness. And here we are a year later. It's everywhere, right? Everywhere. Dream Creator Studio, we are really, really proud to produce two, virtual digital media pieces. We have the Black Arts Los Angeles Juneteenth Virtual Heritage Festival that's happening on Saturday from 11 to 5. We'll put the link in the chat so that you all can join that. But then again, at 6 o'clock, Dream Creator presents Reflections of Juneteenth, a deep dive into the history, of Juneteenth. And I think in doing all of this work for me, just being able to dig down deep, listen to my partner Rhonda Love do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of, reaching out to people across the country. We're going to get into that and on her methods. But it really caused pause for me to, okay, let's get past the party, the watermelon, the red soda water, all that stuff, right? And let's just kind of really, really dig into the real history, remove the emotion from it and read the history. What were the causes and effects of Juneteenth? Now, this week, you heard both the House and the Senate passed and the resolution that Juneteenth is now a federal holiday. I suppose Joe Biden will be signing that today or tomorrow. I don't know when. I know they're probably on the fast track to get it done before Saturday, which is the actual day. And everybody's rejoicing. Well, not everybody. Because it is a notion like, okay, y'all happy to sign Juneteenth into law, but what about the George Floyd Act? What about reparations? What about so many things? And so, hey, just taking a deep dive and really understanding the elements of history, American history surrounding Juneteenth. And to help me do that, my favorite person in the whole wide world. She really is. Need my glasses to see. Ladies and gentlemen, the inimitable, the majestic, the awesomeness, the I can't even call her cream, the chocolate in my coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, Executive Director of Dream Creator Studio, Rhonda Love. What's up, Rhonda?
Good morning. You are too much. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, here we are. We've been having these intense conversations and, analytics behind Juneteenth. We started down this project. We like everybody else. Oh, shoot, we're gonna do Juneteenth. But then when we start like really going, you've been all up in the Library of Congress and reaching out to the city of Galveston, Texas, and talking to the real people. Like, what's that like for you? Tell me, what is your sense? What are you getting out of this exploration of the causes and effects of Juneteenth?
Well, first, Greg J, thank you so much for having me on the show today and hanging out with you. It's always a pleasure when I get a chance to do that. Um, but I personally, I'm really excited about doing this work, and I'll tell you, two things. When I was a kid, and I've told this story before, I was one of those kids that always wanted to know why. My mom said, "You just bug me to death. You always wanted to know why," and I still have that nature about me. And I also think about when I was in college, I spent a year at Cal State LA, and I took 2 years of my studies to dive deeply into African American history from slavery to America, the literary works and everything. And I remember in my film script writing class, I had written a script and I got an A on it. But the comments from my instructor was that your writings are amazing, but there's no market for this type of storytelling. And I was inspired by Bill Cosby and Different World and just all of those shows during that time. But I was writing about just a lot of African American history from slavery to now, and literally I still have those papers where the comments from the instructors were that there's no market for this type of storytelling. And so whenever I get a chance to do a deep dive, I'm always just extremely excited about it. And so this afforded me that opportunity to just dive really, really, really deep. So it was more than just the celebration of Juneteenth, but like you said, in terms of watermelon and red strawberry soda and festivals, it's actually a lot bigger than that and a lot deeper than that. And although, I mean, celebrations, of course, we do want to celebrate because it is absolutely celebration worthy for the whole country, for everybody. But there is a deep history that is associated with it. And we want to make sure that, according to the words of Galveston, let me just say, because I spoke lots with them, and thank you again to the city of Galveston for just opening the door for this work, and then putting us with the people who you trust telling the Galveston story. But one thing I learned from Galveston is that they want to make sure that people understand that there's more to this than just the celebrating and getting out here on these streets with festivals and all this other stuff, that there is a huge history associated with it, and that there are some myths out there that they hope that, as the country embraces this and we make it a national holiday, which we have, that we're mindful of the truth, as opposed to a lot of the myths that are out there. So this journey was really incredible for me, to just take a deep dive in and to happily become an ambassador and a voice for Galveston as it pertains to emancipation in Texas.
Right. For me, I've just been always all things Black, sitting at the epicenter of our community, sitting at the feet, as they say, with so many scholars and history makers of our culture for many, many years. That's been most of my professional life. And so it is important for us to tell our stories. And I know that at Dream Creator Studio, that's at the epicenter of what we do. The central nucleus of every project that we take on is really all about telling our stories. And as we went down this road to present the different virtual presentations, it was important to embrace and learn and look at all of the aspects of the historical moment of General Granger reading General Order number 3. You were sharing some things with me that this morning that you found in the Library of Congress, and we want to kind of take a step, you all, and let's just remove the emotion of freedom and emancipation and look at this at a very analytical prospect. Slavery was an institution of business, a financial institution. Is that pretty accurate there, Rhonda Love?
That's very much so accurate and very much on point. It absolutely was. The enslavement of human beings was a trade. It was an industry, and it was one that helped America really grow and become what it is today. Although many would like to detach and separate them, it benefited. It still benefits this country from the work that was done back there, done then in terms of having free African labor in this country. If you look around, there's corporations that, a lot of corporations like to celebrate that, hey, we've been around 125 years, 150 years, so what did your labor force look like back then, when you were in the business of agricultural and starting the big major seasoning corporations and so forth? But so to answer your question, yes, you're absolutely correct.
Now, we were looking at some newspapers. I think you went to the Library of Congress and went into a couple of websites that, specialize in pointing out, old newspapers, news of the day, if you will, back in the day. And I think I'm getting ready to call one of these up. But is this one where the one you were just reading, where there was kind of like an op-ed where they were talking about what would happen if they freed the slaves? It was very, very oppositional in nature, but it was serious. I mean, it was serious, intellectual, academic. The people knew what they were talking about and why they didn't want these slaves freed. Is this one of these that you sent to me?
I think so. And then I wanted to share this with everybody too. And this is straight from the city of Galveston, from Sam Collins, who you'll see in our production that we're streaming on Saturday. The other thing too is what I learned from Galveston is that they don't say slaves. They say enslaved people or enslaved human beings, because there is a tendency to if you say slaves, then you make it a thing, right? And there isn't a universal connection in terms of humanity when you call it that, because maybe I wasn't a slave. But if you say the enslavement of human beings, now there is a universal attachment to all of mankind. So I learned that from Galveston, is that they don't say slaves, they say the enslaved people. Or enslaved human beings, so that as we move forward, the whole nation can feel what that feels like as you say it. But yes, the article that I shared with you this morning, there is so much research out there. It's right there available for us. And the saying is, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So the information, the lectures, the history has been very well recorded and documented, as best as it could back then, especially from American history, from the publications and all of that stuff that were published back then. That stuff is very well documented. This one is one that I shared with you this morning in the Galveston Daily.
So this is the actual general order, right? And so it's saying the people, general order number 3, the people are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts, and they will not be supported in idleness either there or elsewhere. So they, there it is. That's the thing. They wanted the slaves, the enslaved, to go to their masters and negotiate a salary, and saying that you could not find refuge at the military post or just sit around town. You got to go to work. Stay where you are and keep working, but negotiate a wage from the master. That in and of itself, Rhonda Love, is crazy to me. I mean, how do I go to the master and say, okay, now you got to pay me?
Yeah, there's so many pieces and aspects and components to this whole experience in this particular time in American history. But this is General Order number 3. And what we notice as well, because I've been hanging out with Galveston, I mean, for a minute now as we approach, this celebration this coming weekend. But what we notice as well, which is a myth, is that there is a huge need for educating our country, those who are putting on festivals, those who are creating celebrations, to understand what you're celebrating. We understand, okay, we're celebrating, the Emancipation Proclamation is typically what you hear. Well, if you're celebrating just the Emancipation Proclamation, then you're celebrating January 1st, 1863. If you are celebrating Juneteenth, in addition to the Emancipation, which started this whole thing, you're celebrating General Order number 3, which was read by General Granger, signed by Major Emory, and read in Galveston, Texas on June 19th, 1865. If you're celebrating Juneteenth, you are also celebrating, because there were a lot of accidental heroes. And as far as Galveston is concerned, General Granger, of course, issued the order. Emory signed it. Granger read it. But Emory, in the process, was not given the credit as one of the heroes for this that took place in Galveston. And so as a result, Granger became sort of an accidental hero, is what the folks of Galveston kind of see that as. And then also too, one of the things we want to make sure that is not forgotten, and that is the U.S. colored troops. They played a huge part in the freeing of those enslaved people, because again, enslavement was a industry, it was a trade, it was big business, and even then it was millions of dollars. You're talking about 3.5 million people who were enslaved in this country during that time, and 250,000 of those enslaved during that time were in Texas. And so their freedom, Texas was a Confederate state. It did not want to recognize Lincoln, and it didn't. And so it took General Order number 3. So some of the myths, as people are celebrating it, is that Juneteenth is that they're celebrating, oh, this is when President Lincoln issued the Emancipation to free the slaves. That's a part of it. But it was for Juneteenth in Galveston, it was General Order number 3, and it was the men with guns that came in. This whole thing about the news not making it to Texas until 1865, June 19th, is a myth. If you go do the homework, do the research, the Library of Congress, you'll find that that there were publications, over 120 publications during that time that were spreading the news. Because what was happening is President Lincoln, American government, beginning in September, as early as September of 1862, they were putting the word out saying, hey, the slaves are going to be free January 1st, 1863. President Lincoln has issued the proclamation. So the news was there. Okay. But Texas did not feel like it needed to listen. And Galveston will tell you that, and so it took General Order number 3, which is also in all the publications. And it also took the men with guns, the over 19,000 U.S. colored troops and 6,500 Caucasian military men to come in and to free the people to their rights by force, because those people who were heavily involved in the business and the trade of enslavement of human beings did not want to release these folks, because it represented overnight poverty for them, a loss in their status, their business. It represented a loss of everything. And agriculture was really big then. And so the enslavement of human beings for this work was bigger than the ownership of land or anything else.
Right. So it's part of the national dialogue, whether or not to free the slaves. Lincoln says, the president says, we're going to free the slaves. Everybody's debating it. They're debating it in city halls, town halls. They're writing about it in the newspapers, just like what we see today, a controversial topic. It's all, if they had TV, it'd be all over the news, and Face the Nation, Meet the Press, and all that would be covering it. And we saw, you showed me, Rhonda, an article, very well written op-ed, where the person talked about how the South had been devastated by the Civil War. They just marched through there, torched, scorched earth. That was what the result of the Civil War. And then they said that, okay, if we're going to recover, we need Black labor. And that they were speaking out. They were very, very specific, saying that they needed the Negroes to restore the land of the South because it was prime agricultural land, and that they needed the Negroes to work that land. In other words, they didn't know how to do it, or they were too lazy to do it, or whatever. They needed this Black labor to happen, and then even offered a perspective that said, hey, you know what? Okay, free the slaves, but also institute a system where we can keep these Negroes working. And so,
Yeah.
that's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And again, all of this is published at the Library of Congress, who did the government has done a really great job at preserving some of what happened, the artifacts of what happened back then. But to your point, yes. So one of the biggest concerns was, okay, we see what happened in the South, the Southern states who have gone on and move forward with emancipation. And you want to do it here, okay, that's fine. But now our industry of agriculture is booming, and it is flourished, or it's flourishing because of the enslavement of human people, of human beings. So if you want to free these people from the system of enslavement, the institution of enslavement, the trade of enslavement, then you have to figure out, government, how to give us cheap Black labor. So because we still need Black labor, and it's going to take us a minute to get European labor up to speed. So now that you're freeing them, you're going to create. I showed you the zeros in the publication. I'm like, it's. They said you're going to create is it 2 billion?
200 billion.
In 1865
$200 billion.
Yeah. So they were saying in this publication that, hey, by doing this emancipation stuff, you are about to create a $200 billion loss for us. Okay. Yeah. So if you want to free these people that we have enslaved here, okay, we know it's going to happen. But now you need to let us know, because we have a booming agricultural industry here. How are we going to continue this booming industry here of trade? And unless you give us cheap Black labor. So that was the other thing, is it was a lot of negotiations happening back then. And so folks that are in the business of enslavement, they wanted to know, okay, now that you're going to free these folks from us being able to enslave them and keep them in this bondage, how do you replace them and give us cheap Black labor? And in the publication, it clearly says cheap Black labor. So it's really interesting.
We got some time here. We're gonna continue this conversation. Reflections of Juneteenth is streaming live on the Dream Creator site. Also, Coffee Conversations with Greg J. Also, Beach City Radio, Rhonda Love, Greg Johnson. Just look us out all over the place. We just YouTube. We're just streaming information, and Rhonda's put together some really compelling information, and you're going to learn a little bit about this. I want to kind of change lanes right here, and then I'll circle back to you, because I got a couple of questions. Mainly, I want everybody to think about this. Juneteenth is celebrated in Mexico. And so we're going to change lanes and talk about another aspect of Juneteenth, but we're going to circle back around and let Rhonda school us on that situation. It will be so fascinated. But, Rhonda, as we celebrate, Juneteenth, as we commemorate, is really the word that we need to apply this. We're just commemorating. It's not so much a celebration. It shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. In my opinion. Anyway, so the whole thing is the food, right? The food of Juneteenth. So last year, if you all remember, we remembered that we saw, because we were under lockdown, right? And all of a sudden, Juneteenth was like this big deal, right? And so we reached out to our friends across the country to find out, okay, so how do we commemorate Juneteenth? What do we do? What do we eat? What's the play? I remember when I was a kid, Juneteenth, my mom, red soda water, watermelon, and explain to us, what the deal is. But, as we evolve in the United States in culture, in arts, cuisine has become like this it's a big deal, right? I'm on the Arts Council for Long Beach on the board there, and I always talk about, you know what, cuisine is an art. We need to not just painting, but cuisine is an art, and we're celebrating the food of Juneteenth. And my good friend, she's in the waiting room. I'll bring her in right now. Let me see. Hey, Gail, there she is.
Hello.
How are
Hi,
you?
how are you? Good morning.
Good
So,
morning, Gail.
so you all, Gail Jennings is the co-founders of Black Arts Los Angeles, and we're happy to produce with them the virtual Heritage Festival, the Juneteenth Virtual Heritage Festival that's going on from 11 to 5 on June 19th. One important aspect is the flavors of Juneteenth in our hearts and on our plates.
That's
So,
right.
okay. And so, as I'm chatting with Gail and y'all know I'm a big foodie. I just think it's really interesting to examine, the essence of our cuisine in this time of commemoration, this time of observation of our culture, of our ability to freely express ourselves as Black people. And I was really surprised that, okay, there's a brother that's Gail introduced me to. He's written books about barbecue and soul food and all this here, and he's very, very renowned across the world. Gail, having Adrian Miller come to the virtual event, how important do you think that is as we walk down the road of flavors of Juneteenth?
The flavors of Juneteenth came to me because, as you said, we celebrate in our hearts and on our plates, and that's certainly true for me and my family. I am, first of all, I'd like to say, a Juneteenth descendant, being the great, great, great grandchild of those who were emancipated on June 19th, 1865 in Crockett, Texas. And
Wow.
just a note to add to what Rhonda said, my folks at the beginning of the Republic of Texas were in a slave coffle that left Alabama and traveled to Louisiana, and then picked up, I think, 50 more slaves, then ran off to Texas where they could keep them. There was a whole thing about being admitted free of slave holding state. So my family's involvement in Texas goes back to the beginning of the, of Texas as a state in the Union.
Mm.
And the whole thing about enterprise it all rang true for me.
Mm.
But what also rings true for me is eating those collard greens, having that barbecue, remembering grandmother standing at that stove when I was a little bitty girl. It was a wood burning stove, and she produced some of the best biscuits out that stove. She'd have the, that I ever tasted in my life. So when we talk about the flavors of Juneteenth, that food can connect you emotionally to some of the best or worst times in your life. I've seen people sit down, before a bowl of food and just weep, from the memory. And it was a traumatic time for our people when they were released for slavery in many ways. Yes, you were free, but you knew, that wolf was right there ready to bite your neck. And first sharecropping, was one of those things that did. But the flavors of Juneteenth, I'm thinking black-eyed peas. I'm thinking the cornbread, the greens, the potato salad, the tea cakes, that big red soda water. My grandfather had a little country store, and he sold Big Red. And some other things that we love. So when we celebrate Juneteenth, we're thinking of those memories of those who handed down the stories, who and not just stories, but the family lore of what it was like. And I'm fortunate enough to have that in a document that cousins of mine prepared that tells where the family was on June 19th in 1865. Some were out in the fields, some were in the house. My great-great-great-grandmother was nursing her youngest child when men came into the yard and said, "Come to the big house. There's an announcement." And then they realized that the rumors that they had heard, they had been hearing, were true. I'm
So,
Wait,
so,
sorry.
so you're saying no worries. So no worries. So you're saying they already did know. It wasn't like a surprise. They heard
Yes,
the rumors. That's what Rhonda was saying. Is
right.
they
There was no surprise sprung on them on June 19th, 1865. People traveled back and forth. The president of the United States had been assassinated. There were newspapers there everywhere. And like it or not, Black people could read. Some of them could read. Just like my child at 3 years old picked up, started reading. So they said the rumors of freedom were true. So
how many newspapers did you discover, Rhonda, that had this message?
Well, I've been working with Sam Collins, who is a national renowned historian there, and when you call the city of Galveston, he is the person that they have trusted with the voice of this story. And according to Sam's research and the historians there were over 125 publications during that time, and they were publishing the news of the emancipation as early as September of 1862, letting everyone know that, hey, this emancipation President Lincoln is bringing forward will be in effect January 1, 1863. And so the fight really wasn't that they didn't know. They did know, and like Gail said, her family, they knew it was a rumor. But the awareness of it was there, and you got to think about the force that they came into and with, you know what I mean?
Right.
Why would they send over 19,000 U.S. colored troops and over 6,500 Caucasian troops into an area who just didn't know yet, who just hadn't got the word yet? They did that because the word was there, but they needed the force to enforce it.
To get fighting.
Yes.
There were still skirmishes.
Yes. So the news was there. That is a total myth. It just wasn't being adhered to. Texas was Confederate and didn't feel like it needed to hear. And like Gail said, there were across this country, there were folks migrating from those Union states going into Texas, places like Texas, because Texas was Confederate and still very enslavement industry trade friendly. So yes. So yeah, there that is there.
You and I were talking about the troops, 19,000 colored troops, but then an additional 6,500 troops. And I was explaining to you with my military history, and you veterans will appreciate this, that's a division. That's the whole base. That's the whole Fort Hood or Camp Pendleton is going down there to Galveston, Texas to wreak havoc, And wow, choke off the supply line. That's a strategic location. Galveston is an island and a major port, and so they're shipping goods and shipping people, of course, into that area. They're sending troops to choke that off. And it wasn't this magnanimous, oh, we feel sorry for humanity, so we're going to release the slaves. These were purely political, military actions.
And also, I think we should remember that on June 19, 1865, after that, there were still people enslaved until the end of the year. But Juneteenth, I think, that kind of catchy phrase symbolize the people who were emancipated. It symbolizes all the enslaved people. People had been enslaved far before that, and some right after that, and then later, the 15th, 13th Amendment. So Juneteenth is symbolic as well as historic.
Yeah, that's so true. And the other part of my research, just to tie into what Gail is saying there, it is very symbolic in terms of emancipation and Juneteenth in Texas. But the other thing, a myth, is that a lot of people say, oh, 1865, June 19th, 1865 is when all slaves were free. No, that's the emancipation that happened in Texas, because I'll tell you what, in the time what Gail just said, the states that still had not received emancipation was Delaware and Kentucky. They didn't receive theirs until 1865 with the 13th Amendment. So it was still a fight. So the other myth is people think, oh, June 19th, 1865 freed all the slaves or freed all the enslaved people. It did not. Emancipation still had not taken effect in Delaware and Kentucky until December of 1865.
I tell people, imagine you having to stay in high school 2.5 years longer. Imagine having to stay in, say, the service. You've served your time, you're supposed to be, done with it, but 2.5 years go by and you're still there, not being compensated. You're hearing stories, you're seeing people who, and Texas didn't even want you in the state if you were black and a free person. Oh no, it's like, don't come around here messing up the good niggers, But that was something that we have to take into consideration also.
Yeah, this is real American history here, and I see Buena Johnson is out there thanking us for this conversation. Her visual art that we're going to feature inside of this, inside of our Heritage Festival. She says it will reflect the truth of America's history. Thank you for all of these knowledgeable, great speakers, and man, that's what it really is all about. You guys is really talking about and sharing the truth. This is truth. You know what I'm saying? It's past the celebration of it. It's like, okay, this is American history. We're not just making this stuff up. It happened.
Yeah. And I think it's important because as Juneteenth becomes more commercialized, it's very, very important that we keep the history of what this thing is really about. In addition, as we celebrate, really know the history of what this is all about. Because at this point, with it being a national holiday, you're talking about now there's going to be even more federal dollars earmarked for it. You're talking about major corporations who are going to want to put big checks behind local festivals, and with that, it brings a lot of commercialization to this celebration, and all of that is great and dandy, and hopefully with the proper understanding, it elevates the knowledge that people have. But as we celebrate, we need to be mindful of the history.
Yeah, this is very, very important.
Just for a minute to the flavors of Juneteenth and to Adrian Miller.
Yeah.
And just kind of put this out there that Adrian is featured in the Netflix series High on the Hog, which is very popular right now because of the way it addresses and delves into the history of and the influence of our food coming out of Africa, the black-eyed pea, the watermelon, the okra. And his book, Black Smoke, takes a real deep dive into the history of the pit, barbecuing, and how, from the Native American, it went to the African Americans, the black people, and who gave huge barbecues to feed sometimes as many as 50,000, 75,000 people, and largely on the political circuit. And so we're really, really excited about having Adrian Miller to moderate the panel on the flavors of Juneteenth. Now, in the Netflix series, he talked about, you might remember him as a guy who talked about the missing cook, George Washington's missing cook. I think his name was Hercules.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's Adrian Miller. And, we're going to have a great panel. And so,
I binged that. When you told me about that series, I binged it. I was like, I can't stop. It's really, really good stuff. It's interesting. Our food. I like to tell the story of the time I was driving around Southern Africa. I rented a car and I was driving around, and we stopped at one of the markets on the road, open air market. And the mamas were out there, and they had a big old sack, and it was greens. I know what the collard green looks like. Okay, it was greens. And so I began to talk to the sister. We started. She was like, "Oh, you have greens in America?" And it's like, "Yes," and we started talking about how to cook them and everything. And it was almost identical, right?
Yes.
One of the they do fry them sometimes, so there was that, but it was like it was like the essence, the seasoning, the whole stuff was almost identical. And isn't it amazing how our cooking on the continent in the motherland survived the Middle Passage and got all over to our hearts and on our plates?
That's right. And it's also the reason the very first festival that Moses and I did, I sold the African taco. Now, the African taco is uh, made from black-eyed pea. You make a vegan patty using black-eyed peas. You make a batter, you fry them to these patties. That's what you put into your taco shell. And I'm going to be, here's a little plug, I'm going to be selling them at the festival in Leimert Park.
That's
but
right.
What is key to me is that this ties me to the land, to Crockett, because my grandfather grew black-eyed peas.
Wow.
We do the purple hull, but it's still the same root. And like his father before him. And when I did a DNA test, turns out I was 81% Yoruba from West Africa.
Wow.
And so my king's pepper is a reflection of something deep within me that, really felt familiar and comforting. And that's why I've been selling it all these years. And just yesterday, Greg, I sold to a woman who still had a bottle I sold her in 2002. She said, I've been looking for you almost 20 years to buy some more of this pepper.
Right. Wow. Well, I got to get an African taco. I'm a taco head. I got to try it. The African taco.
Yes,
That's
do.
something.
Well, you got some coming.
Yes. So, okay. Tacos, Rhonda. That's a good segue. Because when I think of tacos, I'm thinking of Mexico. She's got us,
right.
tacos in Africa and whatnot. Man, is Juneteenth celebrated in Mexico?
It is.
Yes.
Wow. Talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yes. So part of the research that one of the stories rather that we're sharing for the reflections of Juneteenth is the story of Juneteenth being celebrated in Mexico. And it's actually been celebrated in Mexico since 1866. Many people didn't know that. In a small little village called Nacimiento. And so Nacimiento was land that was given to the former enslaved or the Black Indian Seminoles by Mexico. A lot of people don't know, and we found out, Mexico was a safe haven for those escaping slavery. The story is really deep, and so we take the time out to spend some time with the descendants of the Seminole Black Indian Scouts. Their group maintains the stories. They oversee the care of the cemetery as well. Where some of the Black Seminole Indian Scouts, were buried, and so they have a fascinating story about their migration from Florida into Oklahoma, down into Mexico, and how they were led into Mexico. It's a fascinating story. But to answer your question, yes. Juneteenth has been celebrated since 1866 in Mexico. And they're actually heading down for celebration this year. We were able to have a couple of them who make that migration down to Mexico every year. They take the same path that their ancestors took into Mexico for this annual celebration of Juneteenth.
That's right. It's a little known. We talk about the Underground Railroad North, but people also escaped by crossing the Rio Grande going into Mexico. And I've been studying this too, Rhonda, and I think some of those people who founded the city of Los Angeles, 1781, likely, there were a lot of Black people who founded the city of Los Angeles, could have gone across that river, moved west to escape slavery.
Well, Pio Pico, the first governor of the Mexican territory,
That's
you
right.
look at him. Okay, now one thing I was showing Rhonda his picture. Like when you Google him, he's Black, right? There's a photograph where that's a Black man, but when you look at paintings, they lighten him up, and he looks like a white man. Just like you can see. You can see them doing that trickeration there. But yeah, Pio Pico, Los Angeles, I think he might have been also the mayor, but certainly the first governor of California.
Yes.
Yeah, so Pico Boulevard, LA, you know that one. That's the Pio Pico. Wow, fascinating stuff. What an interesting conversation we are having today about the Juneteenth celebrations, the history, the real story. That's what this is called today, is Juneteenth, the real story. We're sharing that with you. And you know what? One of the things I would like to say is, while at Dream Creator Studio, we're doing two two festivals, and we're sharing all of this history. You can see that we've taken a mindful approach to everything that we're doing. The Reflections of Juneteenth comes on after you've gone out to all the festivals and all that during the day, and you got your party on. Get to your favorite digital device and go to Reflections of Juneteenth. That's one's written and produced by Rhonda Love. Man, a partial result, because she's come up with a bevy of information, but partial results of her really incredible research that she's done involving the real history behind Juneteenth, hosted by our good friend Ade Lamar from over there at KGLH. That's happening at 6 p.m. after you've gone to all of the festivals and hoopla and whatnot. Check in with us 6 p.m. But then also to the starting at 11 to 5, we've got the Black Arts LA, Hannibal Media Group, along with Gail and Mosa and the whole team at Black Arts LA. We've got a great situation for you. And again, we're sharing very thoughtful and insightful information based on 4 pillars of freedom. Economic freedom, we have panel discussion led by City National Bank. We have social justice freedom, we have panel discussion led by Pastor Kelvin Sauls. Education freedom, we have a panel by Dr. Teresa Price. And arts freedom, and that's all of our artists and our bands that are playing and all of that. It's a very thoughtful approach to this Juneteenth holiday, giving you news you can use, information that you can use, and reflections that you can use. Not only that, we are also linking in with the Lamert Park Festival by live stream. You'll be able to see that. And the Watts Festival over there at Ted Watkins Park. So there's a lot going on, and you can go right into our platforms and see all of it, experience all of it, ask questions, be a part of it. Thank you so much for planning to join us. Now, Rhonda Love, I just would like to ask you this very important question here. Prior to this experience, what was your basic knowledge of Juneteenth? I mean, are you not blown away by all the stuff that you're learning right now?
I'm very much so blown away by all the knowledge that I'm learning. We gave an interview to the Long Beach Post over the weekend, a podcast, and she asked a question similar to that, and it's been an unraveling of truths that were always there, And so for me, as I learn, I'd like to share with people that, the information is here. It's always been here, and it's available for us to understand it and to learn it. And I think that it's really important. We want to celebrate. Absolutely. We need the dopamine and the serotonin of celebrating our journey from one another. We need that, but also we need to understand how our journey plays out in our world, because it helps us to have or create a better life experience for us and a better quality of life. And I think for me, as I read this stuff, I understand that we need to realize that we're living in a world that's not playing with us. It's not playing with us. And so we need to understand what has happened. We need to understand the calculations in terms of motives, all of that stuff. And so, and if we just spend time on the celebratory of Juneteenth, well, after Juneteenth and after the great Saturday celebration that we're going to have, if you don't have the knowledge of the history, if you don't have an understanding of how this plays out today, how will you know the programs that probably should be? How will you know what is happening in terms of the rest of the year outside of Juneteenth? What you need to be looking at to create a better quality of life and better life experience for you. And so it kind of opened my eyes in so many ways, because I'm looking at just the whole thing of them wanting to replace the enslavement of people with at that time cheap Black labor until they could make those adjustments. Well, are there remnants of that today? What am I seeing from that time then that could perhaps still be playing out a little bit today, maybe intentional and unintentional, who knows? And how do and so in order for me to understand my world or outside of the Juneteenth celebration, I need to have as much as possible, a healthy understanding of the history, so that I can have a keener eye and a keener application of what has happened then today as I move about. You know what I mean? Are there some resources I'm supposed to have? As a people who were enslaved. Is when I hear these stories, how can my community, how can my government, how can this system, help me based on what has happened in the past. So I'm looking at it as what happened then and what's the application today. And I think that it's healthy for all of us, to do that as we celebrate. There's definitely more to emancipation than just the June 19th celebration. That is our time when we say, "Whoo, man, what a journey!" And we have what we share in cutting the watermelon. And Sam Collins talks about that. Watermelon was made to look bad and derogatory. It's how it was a big enough piece of fruit where we could communally come together and enjoy this refreshing piece of fruit. And so after we do all of those great things and everything, what is the application economically? What is the application socially from this history? And how is it playing out today? I think is very important.
Sam Collins, I mean, that's a really important, really important person to have a part of the reflections of Juneteenth. What's that mean to you? How do you feel? Talk to the people about what an all-star he is. Who else has found Sam Collins as part of their Juneteenth investigations?
So if you Google Sam, you'll find articles by the New York Times on Sam. You'll find articles by Black Enterprise on Sam. Sam is a treasure in terms of the Galveston story and Juneteenth. He has a documentary that they're working on. I was able to see it privately. It hasn't been released yet, but he's doing a lot of amazing work with regards to making sure our nation and our world has an accurate story of Juneteenth as it pertains to Texas and Galveston. He is definitely a Juneteenth expert. I think the hardest part of this project was what to tell, because I spent an hour with him on this one. I've spent tons of hours with him since then, but for this particular piece that we're showing on Saturday, I spent an hour with Sam, over an hour. So the hardest part was, what 15 minutes of that story do I want to tell, or do we want to tell? Because it's just so much. But I think that we're sharing a really great piece of that interview, and then we're going to make the full interview available through Dream Creator. You can go to Facebook, Dream Creator's website there for the whole story. But I mean, the most challenging thing was there was so much history there and so much myths that he was addressing and dispelling and truths he was getting out there. It was really hard to just stream that story down for this piece on Saturday.
It's just a lot. It is really, really a lot. Not only that, what's the name of the people again that are the Black Seminoles?
Yeah, it's the Seminole Black Indian Scouts. It's the descendants of the Seminole Black Indian Scouts. And Greg, you and I both did that one together. That was another one that it's like, how do you pick the best, portion of this story to tell? Because it's just so much. But yeah, it's just been a great, fabulous experience, and I'm really excited to share this with people, especially since Juneteenth is now, recognized nationally and federally. It had been recognized in Texas since 1980, so they've been 42 years ahead of us in celebrating this. But now that it's national, it's just going to be really great. And so the important thing is just making sure people get the information on the history and use that as a platform for everything else that we're doing.
That starts at 6 p.m. on Saturday, 11 a.m. The Black Arts Los Angeles Virtual Heritage Festival. There it is, Saturday, June 19th, 11 a.m. to 5. I'm going to put the link because you got to register for that one, folks. We really need you to register and in advance. We'll run the actual panel discussions on Facebook and YouTube, all where you get it, Dream Creator, Hannibal Media Group, everywhere where you find us, Coffee Conversations, et cetera, et cetera. But then if you want to go inside and go to the virtual art gallery, the flavors of Juneteenth, the live feeds from the other Juneteenth celebrations across the city, the virtual vendor booths, all of the stuff that we are featuring inside of that. You've got to register and come on into the platform. Let me put that link in the chat right now, and just try to find it. Gail, let me ask you this now. Okay, so let's go all the way back. How did you and Moza come to make Juneteenth Heritage Festival?
We built on what Jonathan Leonard, and we can't really celebrate this victory of Juneteenth being a federal holiday without acknowledging Jonathan Leonard, without Marla Gibbs doing her work there in Leimert Park, without Opal Lee doing her walk to get people to make this a federal holiday. Moza and I went to Jonathan Leonard and said, Mr. Leonard, we love that you do Juneteenth in Leimert Park on the 19th, whenever it falls in the week. But we want to have a weekend celebration so people could bring their families out. I would miss it sometimes because I'm at work. I was working in television at the time and sometimes working overnight. So we said, we're not trying to replace you or supplant you. We want to add to this, to make this a festival so people can come out and teach your children the history of it. And that's how in 2010 we started the Juneteenth Festival in Leimert Park, which is now Leimert Park Rising, right? So from simple little in the behind the Vision Theater in the parking lot there. Last year they say 5,000 or so people coming out, and that of course was connected to the climate at the time with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. May they rest in peace. So we're calling these names today because we've come to this moment down the path that, was this trail that was blazed by these people.
It's really interesting. I remember Mr. Leonard's celebration. You're right. It would be during the week, and then people have a hard time, getting it.
They still do. His family on the 19th. They said that's the only date that matters.
Wow, that's right. That's what's up. That's what's up. And now how do you feel about this? A new generation of Leimert Park Rising. We spent the day.
Between me and Moza, we're about 200 years old. We gotta have
oh my goodness. Man, I just really am excited. You are so funny.
Amani Terrell, I don't want to forget Amani, because Amani gets out there and she's all about Juneteenth.
Yes.
Amani Terrell also.
Amani, a dynamic, fiery young woman. She's on fire for Juneteenth. That's what I see.
Right.
She's doing her thing. And
some celebrity shout outs for us. Even Tess Holiday is shouting out about Juneteenth.
Yeah.
Supermodel.
Okay, so that's what's up. Yes, absolutely. It's really good to see, the coming generations, the millennial generation, the Generation Z, embracing, Juneteenth and carrying on our history, advocating for the history, and it's just really good to see. How important is that? How do we got to pass down to our next generations coming?
Greg, I'm going to say this and I'm going to have to jump off.
Okay.
Stony, the road we trod comes to mind when we think about the path we've taken to get to this moment. And so it's important that our children come out. And it's good to be educated and enterprising. And to me, these celebrations, these festivals, we support the vendors and the food trucks and this and that. You see what is possible for us when we can engage equally on a level playing field in the world of commerce and business and all those fields that we were denied access to for so long. So let this be like a benchmark that we can measure our progress against, and let it be a day of like mental health and self-care also. We always got out there with a picket sign and come to the festival and have fun for a change. That'd be a good outlet with fresh air. Or if you don't want to go out there, we've got plenty online for you with the flavors of Juneteenth, financial freedom, and things like that. That will give you information to share with your children about why it's so important.
Somebody said,
Thank you
look,
so
don't
much for
forget.
including me.
Hey, before you go, somebody said, don't forget Celeste King the Third's family and Freedom Man, Mr. Dr. Alfonso
Say
Hamilton. Freedom, freedom, freedom.
Too many to mention.
Man.
But you know, that's right. I can't forget
Yes.
my buddy Alfonso,
Alfonso,
Celeste.
yes,
You
yes,
know it.
yes.
You know it. I'd be wrong, wrong, wrong.
Freedom, freedom, freedom. My dude. Man, may he rest in peace. I miss
That's
that brother
right.
right
That's
there.
right.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. Good stuff. All right, Gail, thank you for joining us this morning,
Thank you.
and participating in this
Thank you.
conversation. I'll see you soon. Yeah, round of love. Man, what you know about that? You know about Dr. Hamilton?
No, I'm learning.
That's right. That's right.
But
Oh, man.
what I do know it's taken a nation to uphold the history and the legacy and the celebration of Juneteenth. And so what happens in Leimert Park has been happening all over the country.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Now, let me just say publicly, I honor you for taking this deep dive into Juneteenth, and we laugh and talk, and I just really appreciate your work, and I think the public should appreciate your work and the hours. I mean, all nighters. Just deep digging deep into this history. And, I know that as you produce the reflections of Juneteenth, there's only so much time, that you could do, but you've labored so intensely and with love for your people. This is really, really powerful, insightful resources that you are sharing with the people. And I just honor you, sister, for bringing this to the community. It's a thing, Rhonda Love. Do it.
Well, thank you so very much. And I just wanted to share one of the things that Sam Collins said as well. And I'm like, wow, he talked about the labor and the building of the handmade bricks that were built by the enslaved back then, and how even though they're gone on, their fingerprints are still in those bricks that are still holding up buildings today. And so when he was sharing that analogy, I shared with him, I said, and also Sam, I said, um, those bricks are the remnants that are left, that they were here, and those fingerprints and those bricks. I said, but we are also the fingerprints. We're their fingerprints, as well. And so in this research and everything, while we're celebrating and everything, for me in the research, one of the things that I did, the first thing I did, Greg, is I went to the slave narratives, which is also at the Library of Congress, and I dug into the slave narratives, particularly those out of Texas, who were children, coming out of enslavement, because these were recorded in like the early 1920s, 1930s, and a lot of them were children or young or whatnot when all of this history that we're talking about took place. And so they're telling firsthand stories of emancipation and what was happening down in Texas, when everything was coming about in terms of emancipation being brought to them. And so that's where, for me, is where I started. And for me, what was most important as we celebrate and as we acknowledge, I'm mindful of them, of their voices and their experience and their bloodshed, because they're not here to see Juneteenth become a national holiday. But again, their fingerprints are still here with us. And so for me, I really want to remember them, and all that they went through to get us here today. So thank you so much. Look forward to sharing.
Yeah, it's going to be a really incredible time, and I really would like to invite the public, whoever's looking at this, come on through, check us out. 11 o'clock, the virtual festival, 6 p.m., Reflections of Juneteenth. It's all there for you. We've run out of time right here. We've got to get ourselves back to work because we got a lot of work to do in order to make sure that our presentations are excellent for you. So if you all don't mind, what a great conversation this morning.
I want to add this too, Gregory, if I could, because we forgot to mention all the, this piece that we're doing is an edutainment piece. And so we got Brent Jones in there. we're
You didn't
we're
let me finish my sentence. That was going to be my next, my last. Can a brother finish his spiel?
Oh my goodness. By all means.
As I was
I want to
saying,
make sure.
as I was saying, yeah. So just make sure that you share this video and look at the links and let as many people as possible know what we're doing over here in the digital space. And we've got some great guests lined up there. Rhonda, share with us some of the people that the people will be able to see inside of our presentations.
Yeah, so we're excited because, and just so everyone to know, so we at Dream Creator, we really are big on edutainment, where we're mixing education with and wrapping it with entertainment, and so this piece exemplifies that in the biggest way. And so while we're educating and sharing this great history with everyone, we got Brent Jones in there, bringing it. We have B Slade has new music, and so we're sharing his new music in there as well. We got Tia P. We have, oh my goodness, we have the amazing dance legend Chester Whitmore in there doing a piece. And so we're opening with a great local band out of Long Beach, John C. and the Collectives. So it's just really great. And then this event is sponsored by City National Bank and the Arts Council for Long Beach and the NAACP branch for Long Beach, and just a wealth of participation in there. And then, of course, it is hosted by 102.3 KJLH's Ade Lamar, and she does an amazing job at hosting the piece. So we're taking a deep dive into some history that's really good to know, as well as wrapping it with some great entertainment.
Yeah, yeah. And you say edutainment, I say infotainment. It's all the same. Thank you, Lee Bailey. I came up in the Lee Bailey camp, and so we were always big on infotainment, the infotainment magazine of the air, but infotainment being, exactly what Rhonda just described of what we do. That's at the center of our philosophy at Dream Creator is edutainment or infotainment, and that's what we're doing with these two projects. I mean, they are massive projects, and you want to look at it's interesting. So yeah, Brent Jones, LA Big Daddies, Karen Clark Project, Tia P, that I Am a Man project you mentioned, that B Slade, that's a social justice message in and of itself, right? And so I think you all will be really pleased when you experience the music and the story behind that. The virtual art gallery with Buena Johnson, she was on here, Mohammed Mubarak. I mean, man, a couple of more VIPs. So you just have to go to the website and begin to look and see who we have coming on. Hey, you know what? The Tavis Smiley has a new radio station in LA called KBLA Talk Radio, and we're going to have Dominique DePrima, Don Amici, and Danny Morrison coming on and participating with us in our virtual space. And that's a really good thing. Congratulations, Tavis Smiley. Congratulations, Elston Butler, Don, Dominique, all y'all over there. Your Uncle Greg is over here cheering you on. Go on and do that radio thing. And thank you for linking shoulders with us. All right. Anything else, Rhonda Love?
No. Thank you for all that you do.
All right, check. Okay, so there we go. You can get this on demand on our Facebook page, Coffee Conversations with Greg J. Greg J, Hannibal Media Group, Columbus on Coffee. You can get it on beachcityradio.com and also the audio version wherever you get your podcasts. We're on iHeart, Stitcher, Spreaker, Apple, just wherever, Spotify, just get out there, Google it up. Coffee Conversations with Greg J. I went on my TV and I said, Alexis, play Coffee Conversations with Greg J. And it did. And you can do it, and so there you go. We're everywhere. We're just trying to provide a service and create new paradigms of broadcasting and information. That's what we're doing around here. Thank you so much. And love one another. Love one another. Love one another. Peace and blessings.